Got it. Perfect. All right. Welcome, everyone. For those of you joining, looking forward to everyone participating with us today. Just so you know, as you're joining, we're going to give it probably, a couple more minutes. We'll start the webinar session at 5 after the hour to allow people to join. So please bear with us. We'll wait a few minutes here. I see a few more people have joined. Just a quick reminder, we're going to wait here a few minutes and start the webinar no later than 5 after the hour. All right, with that, making sure everyone's joining, and we will go ahead and get our session started here today. So thank you, everyone who has joined us. My name is Brian Lepre. Looking forward to our session today with our partners from REN Energy as we look to celebrate collaboration here for our Q2 engagement days. So a quick overview of our agenda today. Again, looking forward to this, specifically talking a little bit about the Apparel Impact Institute, and then I will hand the session over to our partners at REN Energy. You learn a little bit about who REN Energy is. We'll specifically talk about our Taiwan Phase 1 project. Then we'll have a demo and overview of the system, and then we'll open up the floor for any questions and answers today. A few minor housekeeping things. This session is being recorded, so please note that it is being recorded. I believe all attendees are in mute in no camera mode. The question and answer feature is where you please use that throughout the session today to submit questions. We'll probably look to hold all the questions towards the end of today's session. So as you have those, please submit that. And I do believe at the end, I have the ability, if there's a specific question and you would like to unmute yourself, I think we can work through that technology. But again, recording, all questions will be done forward to today's agenda. All right, so with that, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes here briefly giving an overview of the Apparel Impact Institute and the work that we do. So first and foremost, we are a not-for-profit organization registered in the United States, but operates globally to identify, fund, and scale proven solutions that will drive a positive impact for the industry. And what you'll see on the far right slide, the visual here is about how this all comes together with the Apparel Impact Institute at the center, our Fashion Climate Fund, our Climate Solutions portfolio, and all the important and key stakeholders in the universe that come together to help support our work, from brands and retailers to technical experts to our philanthropic donors who help support the great work that happens. And then last but not least, the manufacturers and suppliers where a lot of these solutions and activities are happening, being core and key to the work that we do for the industry. And as I mentioned, we identify, fund, and scale those proven solutions. When we talk about identification, this is really about using our climate solutions portfolio to look for those opportunities that exist in the industry to really prove and sort of drive the necessary demand with those solutions. Funding is tied to then our Fashion Climate Fund, the $250 million fund that is looking to then sort of pull in several different funding opportunities, whether it's brands, manufacturers, philanthropic organizations, or banks, to then allow us to leverage that funding to drive those solutions that we've identified in the supply chain at the facility level. And then last but not least, scale is critical to the work that we want to do. I was just on a call the other day and sort of shared a laugh with some partners that 2030 is coming up relatively fast. And so as we look out over the next 5.5 years, the necessary progress that we need to make. So scale being absolutely important as we look to 2030. Where we focus, our key area and a lot of the topic that the Institute talks about is within the space of climate change. The nice thing, though, is that the secondary impact areas are very much key to our work. So we'll lead with climate, we'll lead with energy as a key component, but we know that as we work through some of these issues at the facility level, you will see several of these other areas, whether it's water, potentially air quality, biodiversity, and chemicals also show up in the improvements and the solutions that we're bringing forth. And as I mentioned, this is a quick model of our Fashion Climate Fund, really with the idea of a $2 billion blended capital fund over an 8-year period. So this started about two and a half years ago with the time horizon to 2030. On the left side, you'll see that we are talking about the $250 million fund managed by the Apparel Impact Institute, with a projected $150 million coming from brands and retailers, an additional $100 million coming from philanthropy, where we're able to then deploy that funding, as you see here, both to program budgets or grants in the supply chain to help support facilities on their decarbonization journey with any of the necessary programs or activities or solutions that are made available. But with that, as we're talking about $2 billion, we know there's an opportunity for sustainable finance and alternative ways to get to this $2 billion unlock that requires outside funding, whether it's from banks, private equity, impact investors, really driving forth to help fund some of these different improvements or necessary solutions, whether it's renewable energy, like we're talking today, looking at some thermal solutions, all part of the necessary improvements as we look out towards the $2 billion capital unlock. So over the next couple of minutes, I'm quickly just going to cover some of the views of the Apparel Impact Institute's methodologies and how we're looking at this work. So what you see on the slide here is the core and outcome of some work that we did with the World Resources Institute a while back on what we're calling the Roadmap to Net Zero. What the report does is it breaks down the emissions by tier of the supply chain. So you can see tiers 1 through 4, ranging from raw material extraction to finished product assembly, coupled with the interventions, as we call them in that report, necessary to sort of get us to that roadmap to net zero. So things like maximizing material efficiency, scaled and preferred materials, looking at energy efficiency, elimination of coal, looking at thermal solutions there, or a shift to renewable electricity. So again, these interventions all helping support the progress in the roadmap towards net zero with where the emissions are looking. This also provides a view of how the Apparel Impact Institute is thinking about our solutions. So as we think about our climate solutions portfolio, looking at these different impact areas is key and critical to how we're taking our work forward. With that being said, we also have a collective action methodology, and specifically our Carbon Leadership Program, which sits under our climate action methodology. So the 5-step process here, which starts with benchmarking in step 1, ranging all the way through then step 4 and 5, which is about carbon target monitoring and third-party data validation. This methodology allows us to help support factories and facilities depending on where they're at in their journey, with benchmarking being the key and first component to how we're able to take that work forward, knowing what the facility's done, what's their level of maturity, and what additional support they might need to address their climate actions. The carbon target setting, or step 2 target setting, is where that specific facility is able to set a 3 to 5 year action plan with a specific reduction target towards their climate action. And so, for example, let's say a facility wants to achieve a 30% reduction by 2030. Their specific 3 to 5 year action plan will outline the necessary steps to achieve that 30% reduction, which is then step 3. They're able to implement over the 3 to 5 year period. And as they're implementing, the nice thing with carbon target monitoring, it's a quarterly service and an opportunity to check in, understand the progress the facility's made, what challenges they're facing, what support they might need, or how to ensure that the necessary progress is continuing to be made at the facility level. And so this is just a brief introduction to all the variety of solutions and different opportunities within that climate action methodology. And then more specifically, you see here our carbon leadership program. The last slide, I believe, here is a brief introduction, as you'll see an overview of all of our active programs globally, ranging from several key regions. Obviously, those 10 prominent ones that you typically see a lot of the apparel and footwear production happening in, with the different solutions ranging from Clean by Design to our carbon leadership program, with the specific coverage across all of these regions. And the exciting thing is I'm happy to share that actually as of this morning, we launched our 2023 impact report. So if you'd like to go to our website, that report is available with several statistics, several results from the work that we've done over the last year and an outlook of where we're going here in 24 and into 2025. So very excited to announce that launch. Again, sharing just a quick overview here. And with that, I am going to go ahead and stop the AII portion and invite our partners at REN Energy to go ahead and take over. So Stephanie, Logan, I will hand the reins to you and just let me know to advance the slides. Just give me the indicator and I'm happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you. And congratulations on the report. Yeah, let's get started. Go ahead and click to the next slide, please. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Stephanie Boyd. I'm head of customer success at REN. I am joined here today by my partner in crime, Logan Day, who leads up our operations team. We are so thrilled to be here today with all of you and with AII, who we've now been collaborating for action over the last year on a pilot project that you will hear more about in just a few minutes. So yeah, keep going. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. All right, so we have a little bit of an icebreaker for everyone, and I think there is a Zoom poll. Yes, there is. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So this is optional, but we would love to hear your thoughts. We know that reducing Scope 3 emissions can feel like a puzzle of complexity, challenges, and the need to get all of the perfect pieces pulled together across solutions, strategies to achieve your carbon reduction goals. So we'd love to hear from you which one resonates most with you, whether it's navigating your supply chain, feeling like a game of Jenga, the need for resources feels bigger than or the problem feels bigger than the resources you have to address them, spreadsheets, and also maybe not having an idea of where to start. Okay, and I don't know if we'll be able to see those results live. Let's see, and I am attempting to take this myself.
Are you able to see if I put that on the screen?
Yeah, but it's not letting me click into anything.
It might be because
it says hosts and panelists cannot vote. Okay, I think that's me. Okay, great. And so yeah, if you have those results, you can share either like visually, or you can just speak to which one maybe had the highest vote. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. Okay, awesome. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but indeed having enough resources to address such a large and important problem is number one here. Thank you so much. Yeah, like I said, tackling Scope 3 emissions can feel insurmountable without a thoughtful plan, collaboration, persistence to achieve your sustainable goals. Okay, so now next slide, please. But we've been there. We know what it's like to be lost in spreadsheets, data that can't be found, suppliers that are located across the globe, across time zones, and the sheer overwhelm of the size, scope, and resources needed to tackle such an important problem. We have experienced the exact same pain points. In fact, REN's founder, Eric Jen, is the former director of renewable energy at Nike. during his time there, it was his job to figure out how to take one of the world's largest companies with thousands of facilities across the globe, 100% renewable. By the 2018, his team had created the #1 renewable energy program in the world. And that's when he started REN, to bring that same set of solutions to the rest of the world and organizations struggling with the same problem. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we've been working with AII, teaming up for some time now to unlock good energy together. Our goals, mission, passions, models, they all align. And so in collaboration with brands, we have joined forces to champion cleaner energy solutions throughout their supply chains and to pave way for a more sustainable, greener future. And by aligning our goals, energy demand, and pursuing renewable energy solutions together, our mission together is to significantly reduce emissions from supply chains by 23, which we just heard from Brian is not that far away. REN's map, plan, and act approach aligns very well with AII's pilot model and scale approach. And one of our projects that we're working on, as I mentioned, is located in Taiwan. And with that, I will turn it over to Logan to speak more about that project. Next slide.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for joining today. Yeah, so we're very excited to have been working with AII and 3 of their brands over the last year to really dive in deep on one specific country, and that country in this instance was Taiwan. And the reason we chose Taiwan was that all 3 of those brands had manufacturing facilities there. And we also explored kind of the feasibility, et cetera, and decided that it would be a great country to start with one of these pilots that we've been talking about. And so what that meant was 3 different brands. Of those, across those 3 brands, there were 105 facilities. Several of those facilities were shared between the brands. And so that has been great in terms of identifying opportunities to kind of work together towards engaging some of these suppliers in a group model. And then there's also massive opportunity for both decarbonization and energy use and renewable energy transition. In total, if all 105 facilities participated, there'd be about 450 megawatts of renewable energy demand between them, which in renewable energy terms, that is my background. I came from a renewable energy developer. 450 megawatts is a very large project. It's actually enough to get the attention of some of the large offshore wind developers in Taiwan, as well as onshore, say, solar developers and things like that as well. And so we started by just identifying the problem. That's this mapping piece. And then the plan is we after identifying the data, understanding where the facilities were, how much energy they used, et cetera, doing a comprehensive feasibility review of the country, of the policies, of what kind of corporate deals have been done in the past. And then we also ran indicative financial analysis. That's what you see down below with that NPV savings to understand, okay, is this financially viable? Which options are financially viable? And where does that align with current policies and practices in Taiwan? And ultimately that resulted in a roadmap that we put together for how to go about procuring renewables in Taiwan. And what we recommended and are continuing to explore is starting with rooftop solar with those facilities that do not currently have rooftop solar and haven't benefited from that. And then over the next couple of years, progressing to some of that larger offsite procurement, specifically offshore wind, for all sorts of feasibility details that I won't get into on this call. But so yeah, that's led us to this act stage, which is where we're now in conversation with different developers on the ground in Taiwan to hopefully move this project forward. So, and if any of you have folks in or have factories, operations in Taiwan, it's certainly something we could explore. Feel free to reach out and we can see how to potentially get you involved. So, and I guess, yeah, so that's kind of what we've really been focusing on over the last year with AII, with these three brands, but I'll also talk a little bit more broadly about the company and kind of how we approach this. So Bryant, if you want to move on to the next slide. So I guess just zooming back out, why focus on renewables? And I think the reason here is that there's a number of factors that kind of come into play. One, most companies plan to continue growing and expanding both their operations and how many products they're selling, things like that. And so, you know, whatever goal you set for your original baseline, or whatever you set as your original carbon baseline, that's going to continue to grow over the years. And how are you going to hit whatever that decarbonization goal is that you have? For some folks, it's, you know, 30% decarbonization by 2030, 50%, et cetera. If you were to try and hit a lot of those goals, you can see that, you know, energy efficiency, that can save, if all of your facilities did it, you might shave about 20% of energy use. From that, generalized grid decarbonization might get you another 15% of the way there. Sourcing from different facilities, et cetera, reducing other things might save you 10%, but switching over to renewable energy really makes a huge impact. And so that's where REN has decided to focus. And we will show you a little bit more about how to get there. So, or at least our approach. If you can move ahead, right? So again, back to this map plan act. So with the Taiwan example, we knew that there were these three companies with a focus in Taiwan and opportunities on how to move that forward. But with most companies, we start as zoomed out as possible. Where are all of your facilities? What are the opportunities there? And then we put together a roadmap, a plan on how to achieve those goals. And then we work with our partners, et cetera, to make those goals happen, to really take action. And I would say that's what sets REN apart. That's why I've continued, you know, I've loved working here over the last almost 3 years now. Is REN is really focused on taking action, not just measuring things, not just putting together a plan, but finding a way to make this happen, getting steel in the ground, building new renewable energy projects, and helping brands move towards a more sustainable future. So, and I guess a little bit more detail on how this comes together, Bryant, if you want to move to the next slide. So again, this map plan act, this is kind of a flow of how we go from making, you know, ingesting that initial data, understanding where facilities are, et cetera. We then put that into our platform to first identify the potential. So where are those facilities? How much energy do they use, et cetera? We overlay our feasibility database on top of that to understand, okay, now that we know where these facilities are, how much energy they use, what type of procurement can be done there. And then we have methods for modeling financial performance for those different procurement mechanisms we've identified. And then we can stack those up to generate a roadmap to actually procuring renewable energy. Then we get into that act stage. We know how important it is to engage suppliers. And so there's a couple different ways to do that from an asynchronous standpoint, our software, and also just us as a team. We are able to put together materials, business cases, et cetera, that can then be sent over to suppliers to get them interested, get the necessary buy-in to move into procurement and get their sign-off. And then we do acknowledge that there's sometimes in-person engagement that needs to happen. And some brands are able to provide that in-person engagement themselves. And then where those brands don't have those resources, we have in-country networks of partners, sometimes consultants, sometimes groups that have done these types of workshops, things like that before. We engage with them to really get those factories, get those manufacturing facilities, or just partners, whatever they need in order to get comfortable and move towards procurement. And then once we achieve that, once there's that necessary level of buy-in, we also work with partners that help with the contract negotiation. So every country is different in terms of how a PPA gets negotiated, et cetera. So we work with partners there. And then obviously developers are the ones out there building those projects. And we track all of that back in the REN platform. And now that I've talked about the platform, talked about REN services and kind of what we do, it's always much better, I think, to show rather than to tell. So I will go ahead and jump into that now, if I can. Let me try this. This should work. Let me know if you're all able to see that. Okay, I'm getting thumbs up and head nods. Thank you. So yeah, so this is kind of the landing page of the REN platform, which is, again, our software to help companies do this at scale. To the point that's been brought up a couple times, 2030 is quickly approaching, so scale is critical. And we've built REN from the start as a solution to address the scale issue. And so if you were to log in, and I should put the disclaimer out there, this is all demo data. This is no one's, no, you're not viewing any company's data or anything like that. So if you were to log in, you would land here on your dashboard. Your dashboard gives you a high-level overview of some key metrics, including your progress towards your goal. In this instance, we have a SBTI goal set at 30% reduction by 2030. So in this case, this demo company is 43% of the way towards their goal. Their current emissions, their current electricity demand, how many suppliers they're working with, and then how many facilities those suppliers are associated with. So all that right at the top. We've got an overview of the energy mix. And again, this is all for the year 2030, but you can also select specific years, things like that, to jump around to. But if we're thinking just, okay, what do we have by 2030? Here's what this looks like. Here's what the mix would be. Here you can do top 5 countries globally. You can also do feasibility score by just your countries, your top 5 countries, and I'll show you more about feasibility in a second. But then if you scroll down, you can also see your progress towards renewable again in 2030, and then your overall roadmap and what that looks like. You can also click into, if you want to see down to specific dates, you can see, okay, we must be releasing a portfolio, or portfolio must become operational in November of 2028, because there's this big jump in renewable energy use in November of 2028. But I'll reset dates, get us back to baseline, and this is our overall roadmap that we're looking at. You can also see, okay, here's this target, this line that we're shooting for. And we've got a little bit of a gap that we need to close there if we're going to get to our goal by 2030. And what I'll do today on the platform demo is show you how we might go about doing that. So once you've got a good idea of where you are overall with this dashboard, you can then go into our map and really start to see where your facilities are. So if you have a facility in a given country, that country will be colored in. You can also zoom in to see specific locations, clusters, hotspots, et cetera, around the globe. So you can zoom in, and right now it looks like you've got 92 facilities in southern India, but if you really zoom in, you see that it's split between Sri Lanka, Tamil Nadu, et cetera. So we'll zoom back out. And then You can also say, if you wanted to understand a specific facility, you could zoom all the way in, find any given facility, click on that. You can start to see kind of high level details here around energy consumption, carbon emissions, et cetera, the impact on their timeline over time. And then you can also click into any given facility's details, see where they are, what kind of data has been provided. There's suggestions for how to improve that data. And then energy breakdown in any given year. And then overall dashboard for those similar types of things and what portfolios they're in, et cetera. So that's kind of high level all the way down to the facility level. Now, as I mentioned before, the roadmap that we have has a bit of a gap. How are we going to hit that 2030 goal? And what I thought might be fun for this demo is kind of to do that live, do that real time. And so one way to identify, okay, how would we start to think about taking action? An easy way to do that is to first kind of click and see what countries you're in. In this case, we've got 19 different countries for this data set. And you can see, okay, what's the progress towards renewables? What's the feasibility in any of those countries from a feasibility score standpoint? And then also what's the impact? What I find easiest is to sort by impact. So now I can see, okay, Indonesia has a 42% impact on my roadmap, on my decarbonization goals. Vietnam has 38, Sri Lanka 9, India 5, et cetera. So right now we can see that there's progress in a lot of these other countries, but there's no progress made yet in Vietnam. And you can see, because it's kind of this yellow color, it's still using mostly grid electricity. And so how we would start to take action there is I can click Vietnam, I can apply that filter, and now we just have Vietnam selected. I could zoom all the way in if I wanted to, but for the sake of this, what I'll do next is to add, well, I forgot one step. So now I've clicked in on Vietnam. I want to understand what type of procurement is best there. And so I can flip over to feasibility, and then I can click in to see kind of different factors associated with feasibility in the Vietnam market. So we understand that the energy market environment has a high impact to that overall score that you see there. And it's medium. Political social stability is good. It's not great. And then infrastructure is great, at least for the sake of this. And then you can see, okay, direct PPAs, those are most likely to happen. And then virtual PPAs, green tariffs, not as likely, kind of more with that possible rating. So you can click in, see the feasibility analysis. And now if we want to take action, again, we can take those 248 facilities, add them to a portfolio. We're going to create a new portfolio and call that Vietnam demo. And just to make a big splash, we're going to do offsite procurement, just so you'll see on the other screen why that's helpful. And we'll do green tariff because Vietnam does have a feed-in tariff scheme that has been most useful today. I know there's a lot of information about Vietnam. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Vietnam. Just bear with me for the sake of the demo. And then we'll just do RFI define, because in this instance, we don't know what renewable energy option it's going to be. We're going to open that up to an RFI and then eventually an RFP. So we'll save that. And now you can see all of those facilities have been added to a portfolio. And how would I go see that portfolio? I could click in, and now I can see a number of different portfolios here. In my sidebar, I can click through, I can see the different impact. And for the sake of this one that I just made, I'll click over here and I'll see that it's not actually on the platform yet, or it doesn't reflect. And that's because we haven't set a release date. So say we want to do this we'll release this in, say, June of 2025. And we're going to expect that it'll be operational 2 years after that. So maybe May of 2027, we'll save that. And then let me just refresh this to make sure it shows up. And now we can see that there's this big, whole new addition here. And if we want to see what the roadmap looks like with or without, we can turn the portfolio on or off. And we can see that it makes a huge impact on emissions. Again, this is all just to kind of show you something that makes a big splash. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here at REN is put together these portfolios, understand which portfolios are feasible, so that we can then stack them up to ultimately hit your 2030 decarbonization goals. And again, as mentioned earlier, the financial viability piece of it is critical. And so that's why we've got, does it meet the demand energy-wise for a given offsite procurement mechanism? What's the estimated PPA price given some of the indicative measures that we have so far? And then you can also scroll down to see performance for individual facilities, and get a sense of what there could be in terms of cost savings. So, and now if we flip back just to kind of close the loop, we go back to the dashboard, we now see that we are much, much closer to hitting that 2030 target than we were before. And then we could essentially go back and continue to build that roadmap out to make sure that we hit that target. So just a high level review of how we might use the platform, and different tools, et cetera, that are useful within it. There's a few other things I didn't show. For those of you that do like to view facilities in more of a list view, there's that. There's plenty of different filters you can apply to find just the right data that you're looking for. It does serve as a very useful kind of data management platform. You can also create different groups. I added all 248 of those facilities to a portfolio. I could have also added them to a group to come back to later. So I could sort by, a single supplier, create a group for that supplier, and then whenever I wanted to, I could come back and view that group. So different ways to manage the data, interact with the data, understand, and then also know kind of how to take action. And then once we get to that roadmap piece and we're ready to take action and say it's 2025 and we're ready to move, that's when we would engage with suppliers, make sure that all those facilities that are necessary to participate are bought in and signed off. I can, if there's questions about that, I'm happy to speak to how we do that. And then we would go ahead and actually engage those developers on the ground in any given market, to make sure that, we can release this RFP and get things moving, and ultimately get real projects built in whatever market we're looking at. So maybe I'll stop there. I believe the next session was Q&A. So Brian, I don't know if you have, if you want me to leave this up, certainly can, or maybe we just open it up to the group. Happy to do that too.
Yeah, I think we can stay here, no problem.
Okay.
As a reminder, please use the Q&A feature. I see a couple of questions have come in already. So if you do have questions, please submit them there, and I will start with the ones that I see right now. Logan question, does REN Energy portal integrate HIG FEM energy data? And then I'll expand on that. So the first part, but then, any other information you can share about maybe the data, kind of how the platform itself interacts with data sources, comes together. Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm great that you asked that. So as Stephanie mentioned earlier, REN comes from an apparel background. We've obviously worked with AII and AII's brands. So we are closely tied to the apparel industry, although we do have some technology customers as well. And that means that we wanted to prioritize that type of data first. And HIG is obviously what everyone has. We actually have the ability to just take the whole bulk, so that sometimes insanely large HIG FEM bulk file. Any customer that we work with that has HIG FEM data, we just ask them to send us the whole bulk file and we will ingest what we need into this. So you're not left having to figure out which columns to find or which rows to, sort through. If you just send us the whole thing, we're able to upload it and then understand, for those facilities that have used solar in the past, or at least report having used solar in the past, we include those. You can actually see a little bit of that here for reported data. And so that gets imported. You can view that historically. And then we try and make it as easy as possible on you.
Great. That more questions are coming in here, Logan, so this will be good. If we go back to the feasibility phase of what you covered, I know sort of within that you highlighted maybe some of the geopolitical, some of the structure. Can you talk a little bit more just, in terms of how you're able to rate the feasibility by country and how that all comes together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just open back up, say India. So there's two different feasibility metrics going on here. So one is this score that we've got, which is a score of 53 for India. And there's these three different categories that play into it. So there's the energy market, the political and social stability, and the infrastructure and ease of doing business. And what goes into this score is we actually have a number of indicators for each category, based off of World Bank data, based off of Bloomberg New Energy Finance data, a blend of all these different metrics, quantitative metrics that are out there that play into building this individual score for each category. And then that goes into the overall score. And what you see by this high impact score, medium impact, low impact, is that even though we have, say, 100 different data points for a given country, depending on which group that falls into, helps us kind of weight it appropriately. And so that's kind of where the score comes from. And what that does, what the qualitative score allows us to do, is have kind of an indicator for every country globally. I think we have 192 different countries that are covered through this quantitative score, which that means anytime a facility shows up in a brand new location, we already have some sort of indicator of what the feasibility is going to be there. For our more focused countries where we see a lot of interest from our customers, we will dive deeper and do actual qualitative analysis and write-ups. That's where these rankings come from. So the possible, probable, where that's all really coming from is if you flip over to the feasibility, and we're actually in the middle of blending these two things together right now. But for now, if we flip over to the feasibility map and click again into India, we can actually read different write-ups that have been done, combining everything from high-level S&P data and write-ups and analysis, et cetera, down to reading local newspapers to understand, when a new project became operational. And so these write-ups are again kind of more what I think folks are used to with feasibility, understanding what's been done. Usually what we focus on is both policy and precedent, corporate precedent specifically. And so that's what kind of factors into those more qualitative scores as well. So it's a pretty holistic look, I would say, at feasibility, and that's ultimately what recommends how to build the roadmap. And then obviously, as we're in, say we identify we want to move forward with something in India, once we start engaging with those developers on the ground about a specific, here's these 30 factories we want to do rooftop solar with, we engage with those, law firms that might be helping negotiate the deal. We engage with the developers and that would potentially be bidding on those RFPs, and we gain a lot more insight that way as well. which ultimately gets wrapped back into these write-ups. So maybe I'll leave it there. I could talk about feasibility all day, but I'll stop there for now.
Perfect. Thanks, Logan. I'm going to combine a few
Yeah.
questions here for you. So, a question around sort of, as we think about maybe apparel forward textiles, are other categories maybe for those on the call who are retailers, for example, maybe hard goods, other types of categories, part of this one, and then two is, what other industries, and three, is a platform restricted to a potential part of the supply chain itself?
Mm. Yeah, great questions. And if I miss any of them, please bring me back to them. The first, I believe, was just apparel. No, like I mentioned, we work with some technology brands as well, some home goods, hard goods manufacturers as well. And so we have kind of a mix of different facilities, and there's actually a lot of benefit there that we've noticed as well, because there are at times you might get, and really this goes into like how a deal gets structured, is you might end up with a large technology company with, say, a giant data center in a given area, and it has on its own, say, 10 megawatts, 20 megawatts of energy demand. And that's great. That they can serve as kind of this anchor. But for most offsite renewables projects, you actually need closer to like 50 megawatts to kind of warrant those offsite projects. And so that's where working across industries can really work, is you get this great anchor customer that might have some like name recognition, gets the interest of all these developers. And then if we can combine and aggregate the RFP across a number of other facilities associated with apparel brands, we kind of bring those opportunities together and build them towards a procurement reality, I guess. And I already got completely wrapped up in that. What were the other questions?
Looking at sort of, like you said, sort of other industries, other categories, and sort of then tiers, or sort of is it a specific part of the supply chain only? So earlier I talked about like maybe tiers 1 through 4, sort of as we think about the apparel and footwear sector, how the different tiers of the supply chain might apply.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the tiers, right now we have worked all the way down, or at least received data and started putting them into portfolios all the way down to tier 3. Obviously, as you all know, the further down those tiers you get, the fuzzier the information becomes, the harder it becomes to find the right information. And so we've worked a lot with tiers 1 and 2 facilities, and a bit with tier 3. But yeah, as mentioned, we want to work with, and we can work with whatever facilities there's data for, or at least some sort of indicative data. But that gets trickier and trickier the further we go down. So, and yeah, again, across industries, I think that was the other point, Bryant, is just being able to work with apparel customers and see, especially, I think, overlap. Sometimes there's overlap in terms of like home goods, hard goods, etc., and apparel companies, and those facilities are either co-located or in at least the same area. That's great to know. And then, yeah, just identifying those opportunities for aggregation in a specific geography, it goes a long way. And so whatever industry that might be is super, it can be very powerful. And that's, I think right now I've shown you, at least in the platform, like what you would see as a brand when you log in, but REN, we're able to see across all of the brands, all of the companies that we have on the platform, and start to identify kind of those collaboration opportunities as well, and bring those to you to say, hey, I know you're focused on, we're focused on Vietnam. That's where you kind of see this like minimum threshold not met. Flag will come up that might indicate, okay, you've got a good amount of energy here, but it's not enough to warrant this like offsite procurement that you're trying to do. So then I might come to you as REN and say, we know you want to take action in Cambodia. We know that you don't have quite enough energy, but we have this other brand that is also in Cambodia. They could work with you on this. Are you interested in partnering? And we kind of start to build that group collaboration model there, and that's exactly what we did in Taiwan. So yeah.
Perfect. All right. Got about 10 minutes left and some more questions here, so I'm going to keep them coming if that's all right, Logan. Good. A couple more back into the specifics of the platform and sort of the dashboard itself. So does the dashboard only account for electricity consumption in the supply chain, or does it look at consumption of other fuels?
Yeah, great question. So that is one thing I want to be honest about, is right now, given the scale of the problem, and our background expertise, we are primarily focused on electricity. So taking grid electricity, that a facility uses and transitioning that to renewables. That's, can be done via rooftop, solar, offsite solar, wind, etc. We know, obviously, and AII is doing some great work on this, that coal boilers, things like that, making those transitions are critical. We actually do have some partners, some connections that work on that. And it is kind of in our long-term vision to integrate that as well. And you can view that type of energy use in the platform. So if it's reported out, we can say, if it's in the HIG data, we can report it in kind of that electricity view by facility that I showed you earlier. But in terms of what we're taking action on right now, we're just focusing on that electricity piece.
Wonderful. So then again, building kind of on the platform itself, within the platform, does REN have a filter for confirming renewable electricity sources might meet some general requirements? Maybe it's like an IREC. Is it able to make recommendations on more preferable renewable electricity sources? For example, some questions, on how sustainable might hydropower be, or different examples of scenarios. So is the platform able to help with that type of activity and analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of why, if you open up the commitment type, this is important to us, is to know how this is needing to be reported out on. There's some folks that have like SBTI commitments, but they're not RE100 commitments. From what we've seen, RE100 kind of has the highest standard for what is renewable versus what is not renewable, what counts versus what doesn't. And so if there's an RE100 commitment, we like to know that so that we can make sure that you're only sourcing from those renewable energy options. If you talk about IRECs, things like that, that would adhere to those standards. And then ultimately the data that gets put together, the portfolios that get built, are with those in mind. I think a good example of that right now is that, say like GECs in China, obviously those are going through a big reform at the moment, but they're still only conditionally approved by the RE100. And so if we're working with a customer that really wants to take action in China right now and they want to go out and buy a bunch of GECs, we would need to understand, okay, if we're doing that, if we're putting together that kind of portfolio, we need to also make sure that we're capturing those, anything that would account for the additional information RE100 is asking for, in terms of carbon use and things like that. That would all need to be included too. Whereas if they decided to source IRECs in China instead, IRECs are already unconditionally approved, unconditionally approved by the RE100. So it would be less of a hurdle there.
And then it's sort of building off of this question, Logan, talking about sort of preferred renewable energy procurement, the different variable options per country, is there a document, does REN, does AII, any organization sort of have, a sheet or a procurement option per country overview? If anyone is looking to go find this, that's publicly available or readily available to sort of help simplify maybe some access to that information.
Yeah, I think We haven't made it public yet. As I mentioned, we have these kind of country write-ups for like I said, the qualitative write-ups for a number of different countries. And then we've got the scores outside of that. And we certainly have all sorts of different resources we could point folks to, and we'd be happy to chat with anyone. I think we do that a lot in terms of, I would say most companies, or at least most of the companies we work with, one of the entry points for why they're even interested in talking to REN in the first place is, we have this focus in Cambodia this year. What can we do in Cambodia? And just like, let's just have a conversation about Cambodia. Sure, we can do the whole global mapping. We'd love to do that, but like, we can talk about Cambodia right now too, and just focus on that, figure out what you can do by the end of the year or by the end of next year, because we know that that might be your priority country right now. So we're happy to have those conversations. Feel free to reach out if that's something of interest to you. And yeah, I guess in terms of documents, we can certainly point you to anything that we've found. But it is, as a team that deals with this every day, the resources are kind of scattered all over the place. It's really hard to go to any one publicly available location and find, here is the definitive database on what's possible in each country. That's why we try and pull it all together and put it in one place for you.
Perfect. All right. Well, excuse me, go a little rapid fire in the next couple ones here. So
keep it shorter.
And no, it's kind of fun seeing how fast we can get through these. Can you elaborate on the financial simulations within the tool? So, for example, within Taiwan, a lot of conversation that being prohibitively expensive versus just traditional grid electricity. Again, back to that modeling and the capability of the platform. Are you able to look at some of those comparisons to see the differences?
Yeah, I think so. Just to pull that back up, so there's really kind of two different types of analyses that go on. One would be on-site, one would be off-site. And I know we're running out of time, so to keep it brief, our on-site analysis, that tool was actually co-developed with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. They helped us build what started as a giant spreadsheet, takes in all the factors available. It's actually, if you can get all the right pieces of data possible to model renewables for on-site, in terms of like, what if you have the rooftop space, if you know where they're located, how much irradiance they get from the sun, you can really estimate how much energy they'll generate, and then what that compares in terms of compared to their grid price. For offsite, for more of these, we use more like historical. So anywhere that there's been corporate PPAs done before, we try and use that PPA data in terms of what those pricing was, and kind of shift the pricing based off of size compared to what was done previously. So there's all that to say, there's a few different methods for getting there, but that is how we estimate it. And then we can get more refined. If, say, we identify an opportunity, we can start to essentially go out to the developers in that market, test that opportunity, and refine those data points.
So I'll combine the next two questions, and then the last one will be pretty straightforward here. So as we think about not only the status of the Taiwan project, what is the current status, what happens, after building the roadmap, sort of question one, but then two, as we're thinking about those next steps, sort of, can you clarify how the platform does a really good job of like planning and building the portfolio, but get into the action? Like, how do you go from sort of that the data to steel in the ground, sort of combining those two questions?
Yep. Yeah. So we're doing that in a couple different markets right now, where we've reached this point where there's a roadmap and we understand what's possible, and now it's time for action. And so what that looks like is, again, as mentioned before, getting that supplier buy-in. In some instances, we'll have brands that kind of lead that supplier outreach. They have really close connections with their factories, with their suppliers. And so they'll do that engagement, and we just kind of support them with the materials, the business cases, et cetera, whatever they need to accomplish that sign off. from the factories. And then for those brands that aren't as closely tied to their suppliers, we can, as mentioned, kind of engage some of our, we can certainly lead the outreach ourselves from asynchronously, like from remotely, but then we can also engage folks on the ground, our partners on the ground, if we need to get those across the line. And then once there is that sign off, that agreement to participate, we will release like an actual RFP that would lead to a potential power purchase agreement or some other kind of procurement contract, where generally the suppliers themselves are the ones signing, because they're the ones receiving that electricity. And then in some instances, brands are willing to support financially through some mechanism or another, and that does help get these projects across the finish line sometimes. But that's all part of the consideration as we start to move into getting these projects done.
All right. Well, for those who are still here, thank you for staying with us. We have one final question that I think will be really hard for you, Logan, to answer, but where can REN provide in-person support by country for some of this work as we think about, again, getting to action, sort of what would be on the data for the progress necessary?
Yeah, short answer is that we've built our network around the globe. We've got some in terms of partners that we can work with for on-the-ground support. It's really those countries. Frankly, we've found it everywhere that we've looked. There are groups to work with in terms of where we have like developed relationships. Those are those countries where we've been most focused and our customers have been most focused. So India, China, Taiwan, Italy, and then a bit in Bangladesh as well, Indonesia also. So, and then Vietnam. So kind of those key manufacturing hubs, we've got connections there to help with those supplier engagements. But then if there are other countries that come up, we obviously know how to build those relationships, build those partnerships, and then we would do so, and it would just in order to get things across the finish line.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both, Logan and Stephanie, for joining us today. I know we've got some attendees. It's early morning. Some I do know it's late night. So we appreciate everyone who is able to attend, be part of today's discussion. We will make this recording available here in the coming weeks. So do note, again, this was recorded, will be made available. If there are any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to the AII team, to the REN Energy team, and we are happy to continue the conversations. And thank you for attending Q2, our first engagement session, and looking forward to tomorrow's session for those who are able to attend and our continued partnerships with everybody. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we will close out today's webinar session. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.